The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, sandwiched between two emails about routine things, maintenance reports and a contractor invoice. Family reunion, seaside weekend, location Blue Water Ridge Resort. At the bottom of the message, my cousin Daniel had added a line meant to be funny. Hope you can make it this year, if you can afford it. I stared at the sentence longer than the rest of the invitation. It wasn't new language. My family had always been good at that particular tone, half joke, half verdict. Just enough humor to deny any real cruelty, but enough certainty to remind you where you ranked. I closed the email and went back to work. But the sentence stayed with me. Years earlier, the verdict about my future had already been delivered. Not dramatically. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just a slow, steady consensus at family dinners. I had been the one with ideas. The one who left stable work to try building something uncertain. The one who moved away with more optimism than proof. At one dinner, my uncle leaned back in his chair and said something that ended the conversation before it started. Some people just aren't built for success, and that's fine. The world needs ordinary people too. He had said it kindly. Everyone nodded. I finished eating and left early that night. No argument, no defense. After a while it simply became easier not to explain my life to them anymore. The years that followed were quiet from their perspective. No updates, no announcements, just distance. My work didn't explode into success the way people imagine when they tell stories later. It was slower than that. Uneven, long stretches where nothing seemed to move. A small investment here, a renovation project there. Learning how to negotiate with banks, contractors, zoning boards. Learning how often things fail before they work. Eventually the projects got bigger. Eventually the risks made sense. Eventually the numbers stopped being fragile. But none of that felt like something I needed to broadcast to the people who had already decided who I was. Silence became the easiest relationship we had. The reunion invitation sat unanswered for several days. I nearly declined. Not because I was angry, the anger had faded years ago. But returning meant stepping back into a version of myself that didn't exist anymore. Still, something about the location made me pause. Blue Water Ridge Resort. I knew the place well. Better than they did. On the evening of the reunion, I arrived late. Not intentionally. I parked outside the main building and stayed in the car longer than I expected to. Through the windows I could see the event hall lit warmly, people moving around inside. Laughter carried faintly through the glass. For a moment I felt the same small hesitation I used to feel before family gatherings. The quiet awareness that conversations would eventually circle back to the same question. So, what exactly are you doing these days? I stepped out of the car before I could talk myself out of it. Inside, the room was already full. The years hadn't changed the structure of the family very much. Certain people still anchored the room with loud stories and easy confidence. Others hovered along the edges. When I walked in, a few people noticed immediately. Surprise flickered across their faces. Polite, measured, Daniel approached first. "Well, look at that," he said with a grin. "You made it." I did. He gestured around the room. "Nice place, right? Pretty expensive weekend." "It is," I said. Someone nearby asked what I'd been doing lately. I answered simply, "Work. Mostly." The conversation drifted somewhere else after that. I didn't try to redirect it. 2. Later in the evening. A man I recognized from the resort staff stepped to the front of the room. He thanked everyone for choosing the venue and gave a short welcome speech about the property. Most people were half listening, balancing drinks and conversations. Then he mentioned something new. "As some of you may know," he said, "the resort changed ownership recently." That drew a little more attention. A few people nodded politely. "We're very fortunate to have the new owner here tonight," he continued. "In fact, they were kind enough to accommodate this reunion on short notice." There was a pause while he looked across the room. Then he said my name. Please join me in welcoming the new owner of Blue Water Ridge Resort." For a moment the room stayed exactly as it was. Conversations frozen mid-sentence. People turning slowly, following the direction of his gaze. I felt the shift ripple outward before anyone spoke. Recognition arrived in stages. First confusion. Then understanding. Then the quiet recalibration that happens when a fact rearranges the room. I walked forward because standing still would have made the moment stranger. The host shook my hand. "Would you like to say a few words?" I nodded once, just briefly. I turned toward the room. Toward the faces I'd grown up with. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "I hope you enjoy the weekend. If you need anything while you're here, the staff will take good care of you." That was it. No explanations. No history. Just a welcome. Afterward, the evening resumed, but something had changed. Staff members approached me occasionally with quiet questions about scheduling or catering. The host checked in once about the next day's events. The interactions were routine, professional, but visible. I noticed how certain relatives watched those exchanges carefully. Daniel eventually came over again. He studied me for a moment, as if trying to reconstruct a timeline that suddenly felt incomplete. "When did this happen?" he asked. "Recently," I said. He nodded slowly. "Well," he said after a moment, "this is impressive." I smiled slightly. "Thank you." Neither of us said anything else. Later that night I stepped outside onto the balcony overlooking the water. The ocean was dark, moving steadily beneath the moonlight. Inside, the reunion continued, music, laughter, glasses clinking. For years I had imagined what it might feel like if the people who dismissed me finally saw something different. I expected satisfaction. Closure, something louder. Instead, what I felt was simpler. The old weight was gone. Not because anyone had apologized. Not because they suddenly understood me, but because their certainty about who I was had quietly expired. Inside the hall, someone laughed loudly at a story. I stayed on the balcony a little longer, listening to the waves. And for the first time in a long time, the distance between me and that room didn't feel like rejection. It felt like space.